Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. This webinar, When is Silver Better than Gold? When it is Saving Your Life, will now begin. At this time, I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Gordon. Welcome, Dr. Gary Gordon.
Thank you. It's a great pleasure to be back, and all of you who are tuning in today, I covered this vital life-saving topic at the ACAM conference 2 weeks ago, and we had a very good reception because the information you are about to receive is absolutely able to save your life. So how come I be so enthusiastic about this? Well, look it. It's now frontline information that the antibiotics are not working, and we have to recognize that the fourth leading cause of death is now people dying of antibiotic-resistant infections, often caught when going to the hospital for a minor event. We know that we've abused antibiotics because there's so many antibiotics in the animals that we use for our food that all of us are loaded today with antibiotics in everything we eat. And now we have the children dealing increasingly with the methicillin-resistant Staph aureus, and we find that the incidence of these infections continues to rise. But we have answers. So we'll get into how come not all silvers are created alike, and why it's critical, can be life-saving for you to know which silver absolutely is documented to do the job. Now, we've heard that there's a relationship in my program called Fight for Your Health with food infection, genetics, heavy metal, hormone, toxin, because infection is implicated, just like too much lead or mercury is implicated in every health problem that we deal with. So now they're tying it into cancer, and of course we do know that there's more and more data to support that idea. But how many of you are aware that if I send you to Harvard Medical School as a patient to do a CMV test, that they report that more than 95% of you who think you're perfectly healthy will show, in fact, that you do have CMV infection right now? Well, why isn't anybody doing something about it? Well, it turns out that it's not easy to get rid of. However, we can do quite a number to control it with the things we're going to discuss today. Is it doing damage to you right now? Yes. It's been shown that it's tied to the development of atherosclerosis, or hardening of your arteries. It's even tied to the development of high blood pressure. So why isn't anybody doing anything about it? Because increasingly doctors recognize that all too often antibiotics are doing nothing. But it turns out that when you have attended today's webinar, you will know that taking the right silver can make any antibiotic as much as 1,000 times more effective. So let's look at this story. What is in our mouth? Well, we now know, amazingly enough, that those people who brush their teeth twice a day have 40% less cardiovascular events or issues as patients who do not brush twice a day. Now, I'm going to put that in the following context. If you've been convinced by your doctor that you need to be on statins, which if you were my patient, I would probably find a much safer, more effective way to give you far better protection, because listen to this. Statins are shown to reduce cardiovascular events about 20%. Brushing your teeth is reducing these complications, be they hospitalizations, heart attacks, strokes, whatever you want to call a cardiovascular event. You reduce them by 40% by brushing your teeth twice a day. So what would happen if, in addition to brushing your teeth, you owned ACS Silver and you sprayed it in your mouth and held it and swished it through your teeth for 10, 15, 20 seconds or even a minute? What would happen then? Because obviously brushing your teeth can't get rid of all of these pathogens, which we have a big name here, Actinomycetes comitans. Anyhow, it's one of the many things that are causing periodontitis. And who's got periodontitis? Well, it turns out, accurately examined, most of us have some. And it is definitely the antibodies to the infections in your gums that helps us know how soon you're going to die of a heart attack or stroke. So we want you to know that we have abilities today to help you deal with the fight. So just to refresh your memory, this is the acronym Fight for Your Health that I use to remind you that the food is killing us, and we need to find out which ones specifically, whether it's gluten or dairy, that we need to get rid of. And we need a positive focus, because when you get all negative, then negative things happen. But infections are in everyone, and I love it if you can find a doctor that will give you ozone and ultraviolet blood. I also use hyperbaric oxygen, but it's not as powerful for dealing with infections as ozone and ultraviolet blood. But silver makes these other oxidative therapies work far more effectively. So even if you are betting your life on vitamin A, C, high-dose D, garlic, these are things that I use for infection. And of course, I always love IV vitamin C. But we now know that there's no one answer that can deal with all the complex infections we find today. So to move on, I just want to remind you that if you are not as healthy as you want to be, and I will be 79 in a month, you need to look at my acronym to think, why are you not feeling as good as you should? Is it because we need to do a gene test on you to see if you're having problems with methylation, which has become virtually epidemic today, and with a methylation problem you can't detox well? Or is it because nobody told you that even though your hair and blood and urine didn't show very much lead or mercury, your bones, according to Harvard Medical School, absolutely have lead, and it is helping let you lose your vision from cataracts and die of heart attacks, because the day you were born, your mother's body had unloaded the lead from her body and concentrated it in the baby in an effort to save the mother's life, to let her live longer. So whatever you're learning today, understand that you can't pass a test for toxins. None of us. No, we've never found anybody who isn't loaded with bisphenol A, phthalates, dioxins, PCBs, polybrominated diphenyl ether, the flame retardant. Whatever we look for, we'll find. But what can you do to fight back? Well, exercise is pretty good. And of course, you know that I've been teaching that with the pulse electromagnetic field and even low-level laser and microcurrent, I can raise the cell membrane potential so your body is more effective at dealing with the detoxification. But today we're on the infection story. And we know without a doubt that everybody today is not handling these infections as well as they should, because we have a problem. These infections are not responding to antibiotics, and as you're seeing in today's webinar, you can take the silver in with any antibiotic and make it as much as 1,000 times more effective. But how come we have so many people fighting Lyme? And how come so many people just visit a hospital? They go in there perfectly healthy and they die of a hospital-acquired infection. We have an epidemic of C. diff, the Clostridium. What's going on? Well, part of it, as you all know, since you're all aware of my Fight for Your Health program, is that we have got toxins in our bodies, so our immune systems are not working optimally. Now, we do know that you can go around the country and see which states are writing the most prescriptions for antibiotics. And you can see these dark red in the southern states are pretty frightening, whereas there's a lot less antibiotics being written on the West Coast. But we still have this urgent threat of C. diff, which is coming about in people who've been given an antibiotic, in addition to gonorrhea that's drug resistant and carbapenem resistant enterobacteria. But these serious threats, strep, pneumonia, drug resistant, all these are able to be helped dramatically when you don't rely just on the antibiotic. The antibiotic, today it's almost a foregone conclusion that it's not going to work as it once did. And in many cases, it's almost like feeding the infection. But that isn't happening if you take any treatment, whether it's antiviral or antibiotic, concurrently with the right kind of silver. Now we've got Tom Frieden at the Center for Disease Control, and he's very concerned about this antibiotic resistance. He thinks it's one of the most serious health threats we face today. And the simple fact is the antibiotics aren't going to deal with it. So we need to have another answer. This Center for Disease Control says that there are more than 2 million people each year come down with antibiotic-resistant infection. Why do you waste your time even getting the antibiotic? Well, if it's covered by insurance and doesn't cost, it's just the point is that 23,000 people are dying in spite of these antibiotics. So we want to go through this carefully so you see that's like the C. diff problem. It is the greatest infection control challenge facing healthcare today, according to Tom Frieden, and you'll be excited to know that the silver product called ACS is used as the business end of a system that can make any hospital safe and stop an epidemic of C. diff in a hospital simply by using the sterilant version of the ACS silver that we take orally every day of my life because I want to swish it through my teeth twice a day instead of relying on just brushing teeth. I know that silver is getting a much deeper level of eradication of the organisms that are in our mouth. So if we look at the big picture, these hospital infections we're talking about are killing more people than all the breast cancer, all the AIDS, and all the traffic accidents combined. So we're talking about a real problem. And in fact, it's the 4th largest killer of America is hospital infections. And it's important for you to know that we have the answer for it. And we are blaming the excessive reliance on antibiotics around the world at the slightest indication. In fact, they don't wait till an animal is sick. When they put them in feedlots, they all get antibiotics. So we know that in humans, 50% of the antibiotics prescribed are not needed and they are not optimally effective. Now, immune compromised, is that you or me? Well, let's think about it. Well, a few years ago, we talked about the yeast syndrome, and everybody would talk about candida. And today, we have an epidemic of people whose stomach hurts every time they eat something. And we have tons of people taking proton pump inhibitors, or in other words, something that reduces the amount of acid that you make. So with less acid in your intestine, you are then unable to kill as many things as you used to kill. So the net result is, yes, we have reasons for the epidemic today of things like Lyme, which isn't really just all the fault of the Lyme organism. It is tied to the fact that it's more like an autoimmune disease because all of us have these hidden, undiagnosed problems of too much lead in our bones, which is a lifetime program for being on oral chelation, oral zeolite. And we have these hidden problems that nobody's aware of, is how to have a healthy intestinal flora. And across the board, we have major problems with people killing the body's normal ability to fight back by using lots of antacids and proton pump inhibitors. So yes, you are immune compromised. And so we don't call it candida as much as we used to, but it's certainly a disorder of the intestinal flora, because you have a lot of people now in desperation trying to find a healthy relative whom they can get a fecal transplant from. That's using the feces of a healthy person and putting those feces in the rectum of the unhealthy person in a desperate attempt to restore an optimal microflora in your body. And of course, that is a tough job when you haven't learned what we're covering today, because what we're covering today is that on your hands we have lots of infections. That's why more and more people are using in the store some way of treating their hands to lower the level of pathogens that we're carrying. But nothing works as effectively as silver. So let's go a little more deeply. ACS Extra Strength comes in 2-ounce bottles, 4-ounce bottles, and this amazing nasal spray that you just take that blue cap off and you slide it in your nostril and you pump down and you deliver this powerful sinus treatment in your nose. And we have so many people who've been disabled because of chronic sinus infection. Remember, in our kind of medicine, a untreated, undiagnosed focus of infection in a sinus or a tooth can drag the whole body down and lead to disabling health conditions, including rheumatoid. Anything that you call an autoimmune disease has to be addressed through my FIGHT program, which means you have to get off the food that you were sensitive to, which is usually try to be gluten-free, try to be dairy-free. Anyhow, infection, what are you going to do? Since it costs a lot of money just to try to find out how many heavy metals are in your body or what's the problem in your genes, no one's really spending the money to go shopping unless you've been oversold on the idea that all you have to do is get rid of Lyme and you'll be fine, because it's never that simple. If Lyme is the only reason you're sick, a simple antibiotic prescription would have handled it. You have almost with Lyme something that's more like an autoimmune condition, where unless you do everything that's in my Fight for Your Health program, you don't recover the health. But let's look at this gel. The gel is going to totally change what you put on any wound under a Band-Aid, because now instead of just spraying something with the big sprayer, the big 4-ounce bottle, that's enough to do what? What will that 4-ounce bottle do for you? Well, it turns out that if you've been told that your loved one will be dead tomorrow, because nothing they can find is going to work on the infection, and they have been unable to help, 1/4 of this bottle, which is 150 sprays, if you spray the pump up, 1/4 of this is an ounce, and it says right on the label, when you think all is lost, start with an ounce a day. And it wouldn't hurt if you took 2 ounces, because this is not the kind of silver that turns people gray with the argyria, and this is not the kind of silver you have to worry about. In fact, when you learn the rest of this presentation, this is the kind of silver that lets you live longer, because it's essential for your body's health. It's always been part of our diet. So the results are in order to get me comfortable, since I didn't endorse any silver product ever until I was convinced by meeting with Dr. Robison at BYU Medical Center in Provo, Utah. He does a level 3 research laboratory for the U.S. government. He is an expert on how to see if silver or anything else will kill Ebola or prions or whatever it is you want to measure. He's an expert. He's part of the community that is the Association of Analytical Communities. These are the experts in the world who know how to reliably prove that a product like ACS actually is able to deal with every MRSA, every form of infection encountered in human bodies, and wind up proving that it can even be improved and turned into a sterilant product called Steraplex, And now it will actually be approved and is approved for the treatment of really nasty anthrax spore infestation of the U.S. Capitol, which they closed the Capitol because they didn't know that there was a product based on ACS that we're teaching you today that provably will kill even the spores of anthrax. So we live in a new age, which is why the leading hospitals, like Harvard's teaching hospital, Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston, use the Steriplex, which is the hospital version of the sterilizing of the hospital, which we do in sterilizing you as a human by using ACS silver, as I've shown you. So how long has this silver thing been around? Well, way back to the time of Hippocrates. It's been known that it is useful for tissue repair and wound healing. And it's been known forever that you put the silver coin in the milk and the milk lasts longer. I mean, this is absolutely nothing new. It's just that no one ever put the whole story together before, because now it's life and death information. So we want you to know that as we go back in history, before Christ, silver in the form of nitrate was actually in the pharmacopoeia being used at that time then as a medicine, and they used it to control body infection, prevent food spoilage. And so just the idea of carrying water in silver has been around for a long time. Now, if we look to this idea that silver is integral in life, what we want you to understand is that silver was in the food that we ate for years, but we have washed the topsoil away, and we've gone very much into some artificial use of fertilizer, so we don't balance the soil. So unfortunately, our food today has a fraction of the level of silver that it had at one time before we'd washed all the topsoil away. And it turns out when the silver is in the plant, when it comes up, that is the kind of silver that your body can use. And this is the history. On the left is how much silver 60 years ago would be found in milk, flour, egg yolk, or egg white. You can see that egg yolk was a great source of silver, and now it's down to almost nothing. So without exception, we are not getting the silver in our diet that we used to get. And we do know the body has an active equilibrium. It picks up new silver each day, and it's excreting old silver from the body on a daily basis. So it is a normal part of the tissues in our body. And it is always present then if we analyze with expensive equipment. Your brain will have silver, so will your heart, everything, but there'll be even more levels, particularly silver in the thyroid and the tonsil. Now, isn't that amazing? Because you see, it is now widely understood that well over 90% of people by age 40 have some early cancer of the thyroid gland. And of course, we've been trying to make the point that when the bakers substituted the use of iodine in the baking process and put in bromine instead, we've started to stress the thyroid gland of the American public because bromine competes with iodine and gives everybody essentially an iodine deficiency. So we have a very sick nation, and of course they lie to people and say your thyroid test is okay. That's the biggest lie going, because those tests do not find who really needs thyroid to get rid of their cancer or to live a long, healthy life. And so it's important to see this particular information, that we need to have that normal balance. And I love taking, and I have everybody taking extra iodine. I can't avoid it because we have fluorine in your body. We have bromine coming in all the bread. We have poisoned anything we can do wrong, we've been doing it. But it's interesting to see, here's another piece of the puzzle, that in addition to my giving you iodine, and the oral chelation that I use has got all of the trace elements from the Great Salt Lake. In other words, the entire periodic table because gold is essential, plutonium, platinum, I mean, so when I give you my designed multiple called Beyond Any Multiple, which is part of my lifelong oral chelation product, we're giving you these trace elements, but nothing like the amount of silver you probably need if you're living in a world in which the pathogens have gotten tougher and tougher. That's the bugs we're talking about today. So it's nice to know that plants take these raw elements, whether you're talking gold or silver or anything, and they convert it to a bioavailable form, and that's what makes ACS silver so unique. It is totally a bioavailable form of silver, and we can prove that very shortly when we show you the success that we have with this product. So what am I talking about? Well, everybody who practices my kind of medicine will tell you that I would like to lower your body level of bad guys, pathogens, like we started out talking about CMV, cytomegalic virus. I also, of course, as an environmental doctor, want to lower your total level of lead and mercury, and I'd also like to get rid of your bisphenol A, your dioxin PCB. So I do a lot. That leads to my power drink. But now we're specifically teaching you what can you do with 4 ounces, the large bottle on the right, which retails for about $49. What can you do with that? 1 ounce a day is the difference between life and death. So if you have somebody that has to go to the hospital, if you have them take the little pump on the top and spray it 75 times in the morning, 75 times at night, now you've done 150 sprays, that's 1 ounce, and you have enough for 4 days. Now, if you happen to have a deep-seated, nasty infection in your bone of your left ankle, and they have never gotten it well, and they tell you someday they're probably going to have to remove your left leg, we have people that say, well, I don't think I want my leg removed, and they just wind up using 1 ounce out of this bottle a day for a year. Well, that costs some money, doesn't it? If it's going to cost them $50 to have it for 4 days at that dose, most people aren't going to need that dose for a long time. It's just people who are in deep trouble. Most of us are going to more use like 15 or 20 sprays, which means it's going to be several weeks' supply. But the little bottle, the 2 ounce bottle, is also for people who are traveling, because you see with this stupid rule that you can only have a 3 ounce bottle, it almost necessitates, because I don't like to get on an airplane without my silver at my side, because one trip I made from halfway around the world, I sat next to somebody I am sure was dying of Ebola. They were so sick they were as good as dead, and there was no way on the plane that they could find me any other seat. So just a word to the wise. If you always get sinus infections, get the little bottle that's got the sprayer for your nose and the oral bottle, and do both, because the nose is, for many people, a major source of recurring sinus infections. But the good news is that this particular silver is actually not harming the body's normal flora. So that makes it amazing that you all know that we need to have the antifungal, antiviral, antibacterial effects, but we didn't want to wind up killing the normal flora, and yet we have the data from BYU University. No other silver company is even bothering to get data because it costs money. In order to get the version of ACS called Steraplex approved to put in these hospitals so people don't need to keep dying of C. diff and other hospital-acquired infections, we had to spend roughly, the 500 studies probably cost almost $1 million. So a lot of the companies just want to say, well, we have silver too, and silver kills everything. Well, that's not true. Not all silver is created alike, just like nobody has the form of vitamin C that we have in Bioenergy C. There's no competition. Our vitamin C is the only oral formula that goes into the cells because it has MSM, trimethylglycine, ribose. So their products are not the same just because they look the same. You need to learn more about it. But this is where the rubber starts to meet the road. You need to see that it is documented and published that silver can increase the efficiency of an antibiotic by as much as 1,000 times. Would you think that anybody should take any antibiotic for any reason and not take silver at the same time? Well, the only reason you would not take it is you didn't know about it. You didn't know where to buy a proven silver that really has solid, impeccable data so that it's being used at the Hershey Hospital in Pennsylvania, the Mayo Hospital in Florida, the Boston Teaching Hospital called Brigham and Women's. I mean, you need data. But it's really nice to know that this data exists. Because with this tremendous resistance to antibiotics, you know, I'm not against doing everything you can, but I can tell you Tamiflu and things like that are almost a total waste of time. And so many antibiotics today are a waste, but we don't want to get in a fight about that because some people are going to die of these nasty infections, so let's use everything you can get. But since they admit that silver can make the antibiotic 1,000 times more powerful, the hospital's not about to buy this in the pharmacy for you to go down to the hospital pharmacy and pick up your bottle of ACS. You either buy it from Longevity Plus and keep it at home and have it on hand, and the shelf life is indefinite, 10 years or more. We have never seen any way the silver could go bad. But at the same time, hospitals love to sell their antibiotics. And it's only when they are threatened by being closed down because of an epidemic of C. diff that they come happily to joining the use of ACS on spraying every surface in the hospital with the spraying version of ACS called Steriplex, which you are going to want to have in your home as soon as it can be made available, probably sometime in January. It will become available now. It's just in large hospital packs. But we want to have it so that if your loved one is stuck having to go and stay in the hospital for a minor procedure, I don't care if it's colonoscopy or whatever it is, it could be to have a pimple pierced. If they can have the silver by mouth to help protect them and a jar of the Steriplex to spray so that if you happen to have to stay in the hospital overnight, you can spray the counter with the little table they put your food on in your bathroom, because it is those simple steps that have made a hospital in New Jersey that was looking at getting closed down with C. diff problems absolutely 1 month later to be essentially C. diff free, because they learned what we're teaching you all about this important problem of a silver product that really works. So obviously ACS is not just like every silver in the market, and we need to give you a little data so you can understand that really to be the case. So a few sprays of ACS taken every day, if just brushing your teeth twice a day is reducing the eventual problem of needing bypass surgery or having a stroke or a heart attack by 40%, making it twice as powerful as taking a statin, which provably can give you diabetes, provably can increase your likelihood of cancer, provably can cause you to lose some of your memory. I mean, statins are not friendly, folks. So I'm trying to give you all the information so you know how to weigh the benefit to risk ratio and everything that we teach you. So improving gum health, to me, is one of the biggest, most obvious approaches. And in order to do that, all one needs to do is have a ACS convenient. And if you're trying to save money, just use 10 sprays, but hold it in your mouth for a minute or two. But if you think that you have a little more problem, then remember 150 sprays in a day, which roughly one way we could do that would be 50 sprays every 8 hours. So if I have somebody that really looks like they may not make it because of the infection, I like it a little more when I spread it out, 50 sprays every 8 hours or 70 sprays, 75 sprays morning and night. But I just want to have everybody be fully aware that improving gum health is linked to dramatically lowering how fast the hardening of the arteries builds up junk in our arteries. And that's really, it goes way beyond that, folks, because when you have somebody that dies of a heart attack, if you cut the dead body open and look where the heart attack was, always you can find around the area of the clot that kills the patient, because the clot is an end result of not knowing about my oral chelation. If you're on Beyond Chelation Improved, you wouldn't get the clot. I haven't had, in over 20 years, we have no known fatal heart attack. So if you're on the oral chelation called BCI, instead of using stupid aspirin that works so weak and in so few people, or Plavix, which is a waste of your time, or Coumadin, which will help kill you, we use Beyond Chelation Improved. And when you're a tough case, we add Bellucci to it. Well, what's the point? The point is that we die of clots, but guess what? The clot is the end result of inflammation/infection. And when I look often on somebody at the autopsy, you can find within a few inches of where the clot that killed all the blood supply to their brain or their heart, you can see a sore on the artery, and that sore is like a pimple on your nose, but here it's on the inside of an artery. But when you culture that darn pimple on your artery that killed you, you can find it is actually the stuff that was in your mouth. So it's my contention that if brushing your teeth twice a day is twice as powerful as taking a statin, there can be no question but adding a little silver as a mouthwash once or twice a day is going to take and even improve that even more, because we have stuff growing in our mouth today because of the crazy disruption of the normal microflora of our bodies. Remember, everybody who knows anything about this is aware that we are all polluted, and that we have dioxin, PCBs, and polybrominated diphenyl ether, all explained in the center, in the big study called this 10 American study. So we do know that we have toxins in all of us, and these are impairing our ability, and so silver enhances your ability to keep these infections at bay. So the gum bacteria actually escape into the bloodstream, and they increase the risk of those clots. But remember, knock on wood, I have nobody dying of a heart attack or stroke in over 20 years who's lucky enough to have heard that we spent $10 million in the 1960s working with Lester Morrison, developing 9-pill all-natural oral chelation with omega-3 Primrose, and the product alone is keeping anybody from dying of a fatal heart attack because it ties to preventing this clot. But the clot was forming as a result of the infection, inflammation, and that was because we didn't teach you about the silver. So there would be less clots and less people having dementia, because the brain is also responding to these infections. So I need to make sure that everybody understands how we are so confident that we can prove that ACS kills pathogens, strengthens the beneficial digestive flora, gets rid of bad breath, helps prevent teeth. Just spray, rinse, and swallow. Now that's not too complicated. Do we know if it's safe? Yes. The study has been done, and virtually the only way you could wind up seeing something wrong is you'd have to drown in the silver. It is that safe. But at the same time, it has the power to not just eliminate the bad guys, cytomegalic virus, MRSA, Ebola, whatever, Lyme, whatever you want to talk about, but it also starts to regenerate tissue in your body, and that's amazing. But that's because of my background in essential trace elements. I take the position that even arsenic, which we know is a poison, is conditionally essential to prevent birth defects in tiny levels. And so let's make it clear. I'm teaching you today that in my work, I think silver is not just silver. It is an essential part of staying healthy in the very unhealthy environment that we all live in, where we have all these infections. Now, actually, Results RNA that developed the ACS-200 has spent a ton of money. Why would they spend so much money? Because they knew after we closed our nation's capital because of the anthrax spore, they closed the capital. They closed down our nation. They closed down post office. They spilled millions of dollars they spend because they didn't know that this product was coming along. But now we have the data, so now no one can claim ignorance. There is a Steraplex based on ACS that will prevent any of this fact, it makes all the bleach and the Clorox used in your dental offices to all look like it's nonsense. None of those things are effective against all the infections today. So we've compared this side by side against all of the other products out there. And because the technology is protected with over 70 formulation and application patents, we have competitors who say they have one patent and it was just a way how to make their formula, and it didn't prove from that one patent that it does anything for anybody. But they get the doctors confused and they say, oh, our product's patented too. Patented for what? You need to read the data, and they pretend that that means their product works. What works is AOAC testing, done by independent laboratories like Brigham Young University, Dr. Robinson, Director of Microbiology, real data. So what we have to realize is that this product is now made in an FDA-registered manufacturing facility, and it's just passed with high colors its FDA examination, because we actually produce this in a level 3 clean room environment, because we know that this is going to save lives. So we've got a nice collection of items. To understand the difference between there, we need to just compare how fast we kill versus other competitors' products. So how do we put it? Well, the Association of Analytical Communities have an international testing protocol that allows them to know when they compare one product to another, which one is the real one that's winning. And you have to start out with virtually billions, not a few million, and then you have to prove how powerful you kill. And we've been able to show that ACS has a kill ratio that's called 99.99999. Why all those nines? Because it means that it's 10,000 times better than a competitor's product that was doing 99.9. So the difference, please, is this. If your loved one is supposed to have some immune compromised and cannot deal with the infections in your loved one's environment, you need to know the real silver is what you want. So here is a little data. The ACS that we're talking about, if we start out with 2,170,000,000 organisms, kills to the 99999 in less than 3 minutes. That means, however you want to, please understand, the competitors that doctors continue to buy and use from these companies have published data based on totally unacceptable levels of infection in the jar to begin with by AOAC standards. They're just ignoring what needs to be done, and they take 60 minutes, and here we kill billions in less than 3 minutes, and the other one takes 300 minutes. If you're going to have to feel real guilty if somebody is dead in the morning, please learn how to read this data and have your doctor learn how, because doctors are all busy. We're all busy. And there's a lot of controversy because we live in a competitive world, and other silver companies certainly have great marketing literature, and they have many claims to fame, and all silvers should help any infection. I mean, as I say, throwing a silver dollar into the milk is going to make the milk live longer. Is that what you want to do, is put the silver dollar inside of your intestine and hope you stay alive? So obviously we've kind of carried it a little bit beyond that. But when we just look at this one thing, what we kill on Candida albicans in 2 minutes compared to the thing, it means that the ACS was 340 times more organisms we kill and 100 times greater kill, 30 times faster kill. I'm trying to give you an idea that we are what's called a magnitude, a total order, 1,000 times or as much as 10,000 times stronger than what is being widely used. So again, whether we talk now about Staph aureus, competition measures 2 million, we start out with 234 million. And again, we go back to a very high log. So we're getting very effective at this. Mesosilver didn't even want to show their log kill. But again, we were 15 seconds, they were 60 minutes. So there's a magnitude of difference. But Lyme is more like the anthrax spore. It's a tougher disease. Now that doesn't mean that we're not helping it, because we have proof that we are able to kill Borrelia burgdorferi, and it does take a little more time than it does with other infections, more like 8 minutes. But these protocols we have adhered to and have published the data from outside independent laboratory testing, or we wouldn't wind up being adopted as the active factor for the hospital's sterilant program called Steriplex. Now, has any of the other silver companies ever tried to show that they kill the Borrelia burgdorferi? No, they just claim it because they assume, because silver is usually tough on bad guys, they assume, well, because some silver once killed Lyme, there's that, well, they need to prove their product kills it, and they need to prove how long. So again, we're back to doing 445 million of the Lyme organism, and again, we had what's called a 6-log kill, which means everything was fried. It was stopped moving, and that was done in less than 8 minutes. And so this is the number of organisms, and this is after 4 minutes, you're down to virtually nothing. And after, so you can understand, in the first 4 minutes, you had virtually all of the bad guys, the Lyme, gone. But in 8 minutes, there was no more moving around. So this is what you look at under the microscope. If any of those guys are still moving around, then you didn't kill everybody. So that's the name of the game. And this is what it looks like after you've destroyed a bad guy. This is a salmonella cell in which the silver is equally dispersed in micro. This is all a little bit of silver inside of one salmonella cell that is absolutely a shadow of the infection it once was. It is now been wiped out by the ACS200. So as we look at this picture, silver is more critical than for regeneration of tissue. So how could it help regenerate and therefore be a part of anti-aging? Well, silver, after all, if you build a computer, silver is better than building it with copper because it's a better conductor. And part of your body is you're an electrical being. So yes, there's something to this story. So if we look at it, Robert Becker, orthopedic surgeon, wrote the book, The Body Electric, and he started getting results and looking into things that made us, working with silver, realize that as he was showing the ability to regenerate the limb on an animal, using his knowledge based, we are now convinced that this is the beginning of what's going to happen to everyone. If you take the following word, regenerative medicine. At the University of Pittsburgh, there's the McGowan Center for Regenerative Medicine under Dr. Badalik. He's the guy that developed what we called the cryptic peptide, which we called pixie dust because it was magic. It let the finger that had been chopped off regrow. And later on, a couple of years ago, they regrew the guy's quadricep muscle in his leg, which had been largely blown off in Afghanistan. So we are into regeneration today. And the guy that's in charge of all that, Dr. Badalik, MD, PhD in molecular biology and Dr. Veterinary Medicine, will have you understand that he's pretty confident he will make you, as a human, able to do what the salamander does, which the salamander, if he loses a leg, he just regrows the leg. But Dr. Badalik says we'll have to do this with the understanding that you'll need the physics as well as the biochemistry, and I want to have you understand then that there is more to this story today than just free silver having an antibiotic. It's got something to do with the regeneration of tissues because of cell-cell communication. And so when we look at silver helps de-differentiate. What in the world? Who wants to de-differentiate? Well, you hear all this interest today in stem cells. And of course, people are using their own biopsy from their own bone to get stem cells. And by getting your own cells, if we could get a bigger yield of the cells that go back to being a stem cell, that would be de-differentiation. And so the growth-promoting effect of the silver iontophoretic thing is substantiated by these experiments which showed a dramatic increase in healing. Now, I'm putting all this in your head for one reason, because so many people assume, because they've heard of the blue silver ashen color called argyria, that some people who've made their own silver inappropriately at home, which is perhaps a little bit better than nothing, but has nowhere near the power of anything we're talking about. It's only taken Results RNA about 30 years to take their silver to the level that it is doing what we're doing today. No one has a silver that is doing what I have shown you on these results today. So just understand that there is a reason for all this research. So the regenerative healing is another story. So Uppy is the name of a little French poodle. Now this little French poodle, unfortunately, wound up with an infection, and they started having to strip the fur, the coat, from the dog because it was like the flesh-eating disease. So the necrosis was spreading, everything was dying. And so by the 7th day, whatever they did, as fast as they would cut tissue away, it would turn black and it was dying with necrosis, and so obviously the animal was going to die. It has gone into kidney failure. By the time the owners heard of the Results RNA solution, the animal was in coma. And so they wind up asking, can we use some of that product? We're hearing about it. So we started to spray and put it in a turkey baster in the mouth of the unconscious animal. Remember, the animal's unconscious. It is in full kidney shutdown. The animal's dying. It's a forgiven thing, and they've stripped it of all of its fur because everything, as fast as they cut it away, there was more infection the next day. Yet 22 days post-op, the kidneys, within hours, had come back. The infection was entirely under control, and the animal regained consciousness, and dramatic improvement in new tissue growth in less than 30 days, and there is no evidence of scarring. And over time, the fur cells, the skin, all entirely regenerated. The vet said the animal would never recover the ability to have a normal hair coat. Yet 90 days, everything is almost back to normal, and we've seen the dog in the last 2 months, and the dog is a pleasure to be around. And so this is accelerated wound healing. So I have to put this picture in your mouth, because if I don't, you won't understand why I want you to call Longevity Plus and say, I need 3 bottles. I want to have at least a small one that I can keep with me at work, and a big one, because you never know when suddenly you're going to start to know you or someone around you is coming down, because someone around you is still a threat to your health. So you might wind up having to take care of the people around you that you love or that you work with by knowing and always having silver within reach. Because going to the hospital, sitting in the emergency room with other people that may have acquired a nasty, predicted infection that they think a plague will come upon the land one of these days, and people will be dying left and right. So it's smart to know that there is no downside, that the stuff won't go bad on you, and you hope that you never have to use it, but you could, you know, if you're worried about it, fine, keep it in the refrigerator, but there's nothing has ever grown on the silver. But it's now believed that the stem cells might get artificially triggered into growth. And so what we did is this animal was given a little injection of cancer to see if this cancer would grow on this animal. And then what we did is we actually took these lesions, which absolutely do grow into nasty cancer, and amazingly enough, these lesions do not continue to grow. And so the story that we're showing you now is applicable to why everybody should have no fear using silver every day of your life, because these cancers absolutely all fell off and failed to continue to grow, and they fell off the animal when we injected a tiny amount of silver under just one of these induced local cancers. It's pretty amazing. All of them turn black and they all die. So that should try to get everybody to be comfortable that you don't have to wait until you're sure somebody's 99% dead to want to have this and put it in your nose and to deal with the, in fact, I mean, everybody has these sinus infections. So many people are compromised with their health today because it's not just AIDS. We have genetically modified food to blame. We have devitalized food. We have leaky gut. We have antibiotics in our food that have caused us to have candida overgrowth. We don't have the healthy flora. You're hearing today that people don't have to have a removal of the intestine for ulcerative colitis if they get fecal sample from a healthy relative and put it in the rectum. In other words, we have so distorted what should be in us, and yet ACS 200 helps amplify what should be in front of us. So remember, get the nasal so you have it in the house, because all of these aren't going to go bad. Have the gel in the house because you don't want to have a little bite or any little local infection of the skin that ever goes on and becomes a problem. So the Steraplex, as I said, is going to be available hopefully in January through Longevity Plus for you to have in the doctor's office, for the doctor's patients that he knows have got immune-compromised people at home. They'll be able to run their home like a hospital using simple wipes based on the use of the Steraplex. So I'm going to do next week a webinar to teach you that water can have enough oxygen in it to provably be treating terminal cancer in Budapest. And the gentleman that has spent 11 years developing and perfecting that process, because believe me, everybody thought they could put oxygen in water, and it was always a joke, has proven that it's not a joke. And Cocoon water is being sold in 2,600 pharmacies throughout Europe, and they have special water for bathing, and I want you to just learn about it, because not everybody has veins that are willing to go to a doctor and have a treatment with the ozone, which is a form of oxygen-based therapy. And there are multi-level companies that are having oxygen-based therapies. But I want everybody to understand that we put all this together in the picture of getting all the toxins out of your body. And that's why on my website I have 507 references. So when somebody tells you Dr. Gordon is crazy, why does he have everybody take oral EDTA? We know it's poorly absorbed. Well, it doesn't have to be absorbed at all to save your life, because you have all kinds of bad things going on in your intestine at all times. So EDTA by mouth is going to extend your lifespan. But you have doctors who are too busy or too lazy or too something to go on the website and say, wonder why Dr. Gordon keeps giving oral chelation. Because remember, it's been 20 years and we haven't had a single reported fatal heart attack or fatal stroke, so we think we're onto something. But now the exciting story is, what are we going to do to extend your lifespan? Because everybody's talking today about telomeres. And I want you to know that HRT absolutely is a telomerase activator, but in addition to that, HRT is working as a selective estrogen receptor modulator, similar to what Harvard did on their aged mouse study they made to get young again. Old mouse became young, using a molecule related to tamoxifen that is a selective estrogen receptor modulator used to prevent recurrence of breast cancer. So my work is around detoxing people. So I personally take my fiber, my green, my maca, my intracellular delivery system for vitamin C. This is not just vitamin C. It's MSM, trimethylglycine, ribose, essential sugar, alpha, and then I put it with the ZeoGold, which in the next week will finally be ready to ship as a powder with added hydrogen to give it even more power. So all of you are invited. The health professionals belong to FACT. There they learn how to use all of these remedies, and we have a chance to have you learn more about genetic testing, which is going to change all of our lives. I do consultations on the public, and if you do no tests, that's fine. I essentially call that a curbside second opinion consultation, in which, without knowing anything other than the fact that you have a terminal brain cancer and you want to have an idea of what would I do, I charge a very little price for that. That's $100 for a 15-minute consultation that's recorded. But the point is that we'll increase it to a half an hour for 150 minutes. But the point is, when you contact the office, they will send you what tests I like to do, like the hair mineral test and the use of saliva in blood for home testing. I mean, some testing on you allows us to start to hit a home run, but whatever you are doing for any condition, I'm able to give you some insight because I've spent millions going to meetings around the world. And I'd like to see if there's any questions from any of you at this time that we can answer.
Yes, Dr. Gordon, we have several questions. The first question is, can the ACS-200 be used in the lungs?
That's a great question, and the answer is yes. We like nebulizing. We can do it, but we dilute it. And so across the board, silver is able to be sprayed directly in the eye of the baby so you don't get pink eye. The dog, it can go in the ear. It goes in every part of your body. You want to dilute it a little bit so that because it is really going to be a little bit irritating if we don't dilute it. But yes, it can be used anywhere. What's the next question?
The next question is, could the Steraplex be used in bathing if diluted?
That's a wonderful question, and the answer is, I believe, yes. Since we couldn't get it into all the hospitals unless we had all these safety studies, that's a great question. I don't know why we will need that in a sense, but let's think about it. You see, I have everybody bathing in my zeolite and my EDTA. Then I alternate that bathing with Epsom salts, and then I may alternate that with a bath in which I'd put in a couple of bottles of hydrogen peroxide. So I love bathing. Now, in terms of cost effectiveness, I'm not sure exactly what we're trying to accomplish. It might be that, you see, the reason I'm having Dr. Robert Lyon as my guest next week on the Cocoon Water, we have pictures of skin conditions where the person looked like a leper and they could not go in public. So bathing them in water that costs about $100,000 to have the device. But that device will treat 30 tubs that can be filled for an hour to people go in the tub for an hour. So we'll get into that next week, but let's go on to the next question.
Currently, those are the only questions that we have.
Well, that's fantastic. In that case, I hope all of you will have a curiosity to find how could one doctor stand up to the opposition of the entire oncology community of Hungary and now have the leading hospitals, leading oncologists, the government behind him, that it's not wasting people's time to fly to Budapest, stay for 2 weeks, and bathe 3 hours a day, on 1 hour, off for 2 hours, back in, because oxygen is an important nutrient. And he has put it in water in such an effective way that they sell it. It's probably $5 a liter. In this country, it would probably be $15 a liter, but bottom line, they are seeing dramatic things, and only by listening to what is going on will you become aware that maybe you need to see a doctor in our country that does some kind of oxidative therapy, which could be rectal ozone. It could be an ozone sauna. We have different things, but I have to ask you to tune in next week so we can give you another exciting story from my travels around the world. Thank you for your participation today.
Thank you, Dr. Gordon. Thank you, everyone, for joining today. If you'd like to order any of the products Dr. Gordon mentioned during today's webinar, please call Longevity Plus to speak with one of the product consultants at 1-800-580-7587. That's 1-800-580-7587. To learn more about Dr. Gordon, please visit www.gordonresearch.com. This presentation will be available for review at www.gordonresearch.com within 7 to 10 business days. This concludes the webinar for today. Have a wonderful day.